My sister fell in love with my fiancé. In order to get Song Chu Nian, she hired someone to defile me and colluded with my father to sell me to the prince's palace as a concubine. I went to ask Song Chunian to save me, but he ordered his men to throw me out. "You are already dirty. How can you be worthy of me?" In the end, I was tortured and bullied in the palace for 2 years and died in a mass grave in the snow. Living a new life, my sister invited me to have a drink again. "This is your favorite peach blossom wine." I took the glass and drank it all. I knew there was drug in the wine, but I was reborn, but my sister didn't know. On the eve of the coming-of-age ceremony, large lanterns were hung in front of the Jiang residence, and the atmosphere was filled with joy. Everyone in the capital knows that Lord Zhang's most beloved concubine, Jiang Xuerong, that is, me, will have the most splendid coming-of-age banquet tomorrow. The moon was rising above the branches, and my elder sister Jiang Yufu came to my yard with a food box. "I specially brought your favorite peach blossom wine to celebrate for you." As usual, sister pinched the tip of my nose and smiled lovingly. I also hugged her arm and acted coquettishly as before. Sister still loves me the most. After the food and wine were served, Jiang Yufu told the maid in my room, "Yener Tsuela, go to my courtyard and get the gift I prepared for Xuerong." She also sent away the other servants, and today I will personally serve our second young lady. I sat at the table eating glutinous rice and lotus root, watching her busying herself with arrangements inside and outside the house. After 2 or 3 glasses of wine, Yener and Tsuelua still hadn't come back. I held my forehead and felt a little uncomfortable. "Sister, this wine seems not right. It's very bitter. I didn't drink much, but I feel dizzy." A hint of joy flashed in Jiang Yufu's eyes, and she poured me another glass of wine. "My silly sister, you are still young and don't understand that all the flavors of life are nothing compared to the word bitter." I sneered in my heart. How could I not understand? I had such a hard life in my previous life. So, in this life, I will let you taste this pain. I calculated that the time was almost up and stood up shakily. "I'll go and see why those 2 girls haven't come back yet. They must be taking the opportunity to slack off." Seeing this, Jiang Yufu immediately came to help me, her eyes full of a confident smile, but before she could reach my side, her body went limp and she fell down. I put away the confusion in my eyes, sat down with a smile, and looked down at her. "Sister set up this situation on purpose, so please enjoy it tonight, and don't waste all the planning and thoughtfulness." Jiang Yufu's face was filled with panic. She covered her chest and tried to call for help, but she could no longer make a sound. After a while, she fell asleep. Yener and Tsuelua pushed the door open and lifted her onto the bed together. After taking off her clothes, the 3 of us hid in the warm room and waited quietly for someone to come. Jiang Yufu never thought that I was reborn this morning. I prepared the antidote in advance and took it with Yener and Tsuelua, and also prepared a sleeping pill for Jiang Yufu. In the previous life, Yener and Tsuelua were drugged and beaten to death by their father the next day on the charge of being evil servants. In this life, after being locked in the woodshed, they took the opportunity to escape. The Jiang residence was bustling with activity, and no one noticed anything unusual in my courtyard. After a while, there was a light knock on the door, and then the door was pushed open, and I heard someone say, "Please enjoy yourself, Your Highness." I recognized this voice. It was the servant beside my father. The man called Prince is Qinmu, the Queen Mother's most beloved youngest son, and also the most notorious bully in the capital. The room was pitch black, and Qinmu didn't realize that the person on the bed was not me. He took off his clothes quickly, threw himself on the bed, and got into the blanket wrapped around Jiang Yufu. "My little beauty, you miss me so much, and today you are finally in my hands. I will teach you how to be happy." She usually acts like a lady from a wealthy family, but she is just a concubine's daughter, and she is very arrogant. "I spent 200,000 taels and finally got you." When these dirty words poured into my ears, it felt like there was a fire burning in my heart, making me feel heartbroken. In my previous life, I thought it was only Jiang Yufu who harmed me. After she knocked me unconscious, she let Qinmu defile me. This dirty deed was discovered the next day. My father was so furious that he sent me to the palace and kicked me out of the house. I never understood why my father didn't listen to my explanations and why he never came to see me. Later, I understood that the drama that harmed me was that Jiang Yufu was targeting the early Song dynasty, and my father was bribed with 200,000 taels of silver. While I was still thinking about my past life, I suddenly felt my hands were wet and tears were falling. Yenner cried because she felt sorry for me. Suelua covered my ears tightly to prevent me from hearing. I gently squeezed their hands to indicate that I was fine. Every word Qin Mu said was like a knife, cutting into my heart, bleeding and seeping into my internal organs, hurting me so much that I could hardly breathe. Finally, after he finished and fell into a deep sleep, Yenner and Suelua and I climbed out of the back window and left the house under the cover of night. We rushed all the way to Zhou Mansion. Zhou Moru, the eldest daughter of the Zhou Mansion, is my close friend and the only person I can trust at present. When we arrived at Zhou's house, after I explained what happened tonight, Mo Ru was so angry that she smashed 2 jade candlesticks. What a jerk! What a jerk! How could there be a father who sells his daughter and a sister who harms her sister? She was so nice to you on weekdays, but it was all fake. Yes, how could there be a father who sells his daughter? In my previous life, Qin Mu wanted me to be his concubine. My father knew that I would rather die than agree, but he was very concerned about the 200,000 taels Qin Mu gave him. So when Jiang Yufu proposed to knock me unconscious and make it a done deal, he did not object. If I give in to him out of consideration for my reputation, then he will do as he wishes. If I didn't obey, he would cut off all ties with me and gain a reputation for being a strict family manager. Without my mother's family to rely on, I was in Qin Mu's hands and could no longer defeat him. Qin Mu also agreed to this idea. After all, his reputation couldn't be any worse. He never cared. He just wanted to get me. So, a pot of peach blossom wine was brewed. My father got the money. My sister eliminated her love rival, and the 2 relatives I trusted most joined forces to push me into hell on earth. Girl, if you are sad, just cry. Suelua saw that I didn't say anything, so she held my hand and said with sobs. Those words were extremely vile, but luckily our girl was smart enough to anticipate them and prepare the antidote in advance, so she was able to maintain her innocence. I looked at Suelua and felt uncomfortable. My silly girl is still sad about hearing those obscene words, but she doesn't know that in the 2 years in the palace in my previous life, these were commonplace for me. I gently wiped Suelua's tears. It's okay, girl. I'm just sitting here. If someone hurts us, we can just fight back. Emoru nodded. Okay. How do you say to fight her? I will beat her with knives, guns, sticks, and clubs until you are relieved. As she said that, she picked up the short dagger beside her and started to think about it. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Of course I won't beat her up openly. I will make her live a life worse than death. Okay, I'll do whatever you say. By the way, have you told Song Chunian? With his support, I'm sure your father will give you some leeway. I shook my head. Now is not the time to look for him. In my previous life, after I was kicked out of my home, I managed to escape from the custody of Prince Mu's mansion and went to find Song Chunian. But the door of Song's mansion was closed tightly, and no matter how hard I knocked, the door would not open. It was not until the evening that the housekeeper opened the door and delivered a message. My son is a favorite of the emperor and will be promoted to a prime minister in the future. Now the whole capital knows about your romantic affairs. The son said that you are so undisciplined that your body is dirty and you are not worthy of him. Don't come here again in the future. I couldn't hold back the tears that I had been holding back for a whole day, and they fell. The person who gave me a sugar figurine of White Snake when I was a child and said that he would marry me when I grew up no matter what difficulties and dangers he had to endure. The person who said that he would protect me all my life and would come to propose marriage to me after I came of age. He didn't believe me. He thinks I'm dirty. But I am not dirty. I am clean and have a clear conscience. The dirty ones are the ones who harm me. Why did I, a victim, become the target of public criticism? After I left the Song mansion, I saw Qin Mu standing at the street corner. He sneered, "Jiang Shuerong, where else can you escape to?" From then on, I never saw Song Chunyan again. The next morning, Mo Ru and I took the Zhou mansion's carriage to the Jiang mansion. The Jiang mansion was decorated with lights and was very lively. I sat in the carriage and waited for the opportunity. But it was almost time for the ceremony, and I hadn't come yet. My father was a little anxious. "Yufu, go check on your sister. It's all my fault. I usually spoiled this child, and today she stayed in bed again." But after he finished speaking, he realized that Jiang Yufu was not there. Jiang Yufu did not go home last night, and no one in her courtyard reported it. I had expected this from the beginning. Jiang Yufu was arrogant and often beat and scolded the servants. Even her personal maid had her monthly salary deducted, and she had been punished to kneel. Therefore, even if she did not return home overnight, the servants would take the opportunity to do what they wanted, and no one would bother her. "Come on, let's go and wake up this lazy girl." Emoru smiled and greeted everyone. She replaced the role of Jiang Yufu in her previous life. But when everyone pushed open the door, what they saw was messy furnishings and a man snoring loudly on the bed. My father was so angry that he was shaking and yelled, "Jiang Shuerong, you are trying to kill me." I dressed neatly and leaned out from behind my father. "Father, you called me?" My daughter missed my mother last night, went back to her yard, drank some wine, and fell asleep. "It's my fault that I got up late today. Please punish me, father." I lowered my head, my face full of guilt, as if I had done something wrong. But everyone understood that the more serious issue now was who the woman lying on my bed with her legs bare was. The noise had woken up the woman on the bed. She rubbed her eyes and sat up. After seeing the situation in the room clearly, she screamed in shock. His father was just as surprised as he was. I sat down on the ground, tears streaming down my face. "Oh my God, sister. How could you do such a shameless thing? How can I, your younger sister, live in the world with dignity?" After crying twice, I threw myself at the doorpost and was pulled back by Emoru. "You are an innocent person. If you die for such a bitch, wouldn't it be a loss? It is she who brings shame to the Jiang family, not you." When my father heard this, his face changed. Jiang Yufu was dumbfounded. This was the scene she had prepared, but I acted it out. Qin Mu, who had slept enough, also woke up. After seeing that the person on the bed was Jiang Yufu, his face became gloomy. He stood up and was about to leave, but was stopped by his father. "Your Majesty, my daughter's innocence has been ruined in your hands. You can't just walk away like this." Qin Mu sneered twice. "Although she invited me to come, I can still take responsibility if she wants me to. I heard that the eldest daughter of the Jiang family has the most moving singing voice, and the palace just happens to be in need of a singing girl, so let's send her over." After saying that, he shook off his father and walked away. The father froze in place, all his plans disrupted. Friends and relatives around them also began to talk about it. The Jiang family actually raised such a daughter. What a shame for their decades-long reputation. My father spent half his life seeking fame and reputation, and the thing he valued most was his face. So he turned around and looked at Jiang Yufu, who was crying miserably, and ordered hatefully, "Go get a rope and strangle this beast to death for me." Jiang Yufu screamed and rushed over from the bed in dishevel. "Father, my daughter was harmed by that bitch Jiang Shuerong. Before she could finish her words, she was interrupted by her father with a hard slap in the face. "Stop talking nonsense. Shut her mouth. From now on, my Jiang family will not have a daughter as shameful as you. Tie her up and throw her out. From now on, she will have nothing to do with the Jiang family." After saying this, my father fainted, holding his chest with a look of pain on his face. I watched this play with great satisfaction. The ending of this chapter is the same as that of the previous life. The difference is that Jiang Yufu and I swapped positions. I looked at the guests with an apologetic look on my face. "I have something going on at home today. Please understand." After sending the guests away, I looked at Jiang Yufu, who was still struggling, and said sternly to the housekeeper, Didn't you understand what your father ordered? Jiang Yufu was tied up and taken out from the back door, put into a carriage, and sent to a remote alley. According to the agreement, people from the palace will be here soon. I just don't know if Qin Mu still wants it now that the person has been changed. Mo Ru sat with me in the flower hall and drank tea to calm my nerves. Shuirong, do you know Qin Mu? He seemed to have said something to you just now. I shook my head with a look of fear. How dare I mess with such a smelly person? But in fact, I heard clearly what he said when he passed by me. He said, I will get you sooner or later. I endured and didn't stab him with the dagger in my hand. This was the knife I had prepared to kill myself if my father didn't punish Jiang Yufu. By the way, you said there was another scene. What was it? Mo Ru asked. I smiled and looked outside the door. Don't worry, it will be there soon. Qin Mu would never give up. With his personality, he would never let himself suffer any loss. After a while, the guards from the palace came and wanted to see my father. The housekeeper looked at me with embarrassment and I smiled and ordered, just go and invite him, even if you feel dizzy. I knew my father was pretending to be faint. In order to show that Chen Liu's old father was extremely angry with his daughter, he could protect his reputation. My father kept coughing when he saw the people from Prince Mu's mansion, but they didn't care about his weakness. They sat in the main seat and went straight to the point. The prince said that the Jiang mansion was not good at doing things and let the prince sleep with the wrong person, so the 200,000 taels of gold should be returned to the Jiang mansion. As for the mental exhaustion, the prince was kind-hearted and didn't care. In addition, the Jiang family sent dirty things over. If the master misses his daughter, he will give the prince 20,000 taels of silver every year, and the prince will spare her life. If she dies, the prince will reveal the transaction with the master. The prince never takes reputation, a false thing, seriously. There was resentment and viciousness in his father's eyes, but he didn't dare to resist. He glanced at Mo Ru and me and asked me to go back to the yard. But I know that he can't keep his money and may even lose it. In less than an incense stick of time, the guard left with the silver bill. The housekeeper came hurriedly to report, the master has fainted and is vomiting blood. This time I really felt dizzy from anger. After all, not only did he lose his daughter, but he also lost his soldiers. I sat by the window, cutting paper cuts absent-mindedly. What should I do? My father fainted, so I just asked a doctor. Today is my coming-of-age day, and I have already made an appointment to burn incense and pray for blessings, so I can't delay. How about this? You go and report to the madam and tell her about my sister. Madame Zhao of the Jiang mansion is Jiang Yufu's biological mother. In the 3rd year after we moved to the capital, in order to win over the powerful, my father forced Zhao, who was not good at horse riding, to play polo with the ladies of the nobles. The lady fell off the horse and broke her leg. From then on, she rarely went out to manage affairs. I used to think that she was also a poor person persecuted by her father, but later when I was tortured in the palace, she limped all the way to the palace to find me. Back then, the master doted on your mother, that bitch, saying that she was beautiful and charming. But what about now? She is in the underworld, and her daughter is a lowly concubine like her, while my daughter married the 3rd-place winner. After all, only those who are alive can be winners. But madam, after all, cause and effect are reincarnation. Today, I will show you that being alive does not necessarily make you a winner. Seeing that he couldn't stop me, the butler sighed and went to find his wife. Mo Ru sat on the Kong and clapped her hands. Shuirong, you did a great job. This is how we deal with these people. I looked at the Mandarin duck window paper cut in my hand and whispered, is this good enough? It's far from enough. It's just the beginning. Compared to the suffering I endured in my previous life, it is far from enough. In my previous life, my father cut off ties with me after I was labeled shameless. Everyone admired the Jiang family for being pure and honest, and not harboring filth. But little did they know that the Jiang mansion was the dirtiest place. After I was brought into the palace, I lived a life worse than death. Because I would rather die than obey, I was beaten all over with wounds, and my wounds were sprinkled with coarse salt. Chinmu made me kneel in the yard on a winter night and poured basins of cold water over my head. The cold water dissolved the salt, and it hurt so much that I was sweating all over, and I couldn't stop shivering from the cold. Every time he poured a basin of water, he would ask again, "Are you willing to serve me?" I shook my head, and he poured another basin of water. This repeated until I fainted. Sometimes when he was in a good mood, he would let me watch him being intimate with other women. I lowered my head and didn't look, so he twisted my chin and scolded me. "You bitch, I spent 200,000 taels. Can I buy a nod from you?" Seeing that I didn't answer, he exerted force with his hands and removed my entire jaw. Seeing that I couldn't close my mouth, he returned to the bed with satisfaction. I was tortured by him for 2 years. In the past 2 years, Jiang Yufu married a top scholar, her father was promoted, and even Zhao dared to go out with a limp. But all this has nothing to do with me anymore. On a snowy winter day, Chinmu came to my room and pulled me out of bed. "I'm asking you for the last time, are you willing?" I spat a mouthful of bloody phlegm in his face. He was so angry that he threw me heavily to the ground. I felt my internal organs were numb, and my chest was so blocked that I could hardly breathe. "Pull it away and throw it away." I was thrown into a mass grave, surrounded by rotting corpses and bones. I suppressed my nausea and climbed out from the bottom of the pit little by little. I want revenge for my Yenner and Sueloa, for myself, and for the trust that was betrayed. Being tortured like that in the palace, I kept forcing myself to stay awake. I had to stay alive to take revenge. Before she died, my mother held my hand and told me, "As long as you are alive, there is hope." My mother said that she would never be able to leave the Jiang family house in her lifetime, but she hoped that I could go out and live for myself. It would be good if you could find a good husband and live a peaceful life, but it would also be good if you could become a nun in the mountains or a fisherman in the water. As long as you are comfortable, I can rest assured in the underworld. Just one thing, you must promise me that you will never become a concubine, which is a life without dignity and respect. But mother, my father still sold me to someone as a concubine. That was my biological father. He had held me in his arms, coaxed me, fed me jerky, and taken me to catch sparrows. On a snowy day, he happily held me above his head and said, "Xuerong, look, it's snowing. It snowed heavily on the day you were born. You are as crystal clear as a snow doll. So Daddy named you Xuerong, which means hibiscus in the snow. Let's go. Daddy takes Xuerong to make a snowman." My father only has 2 daughters, my sister and I. We are his pair of beautiful lotus flowers, one summer and one winter. I will always remember that day. Amidst the falling snow, my father held me and spun around. I was so happy that I felt as if the whole world belonged to me. But why did everything become like this? It seemed that everything changed since the year my father got a promotion and we moved to the capital. My father was becoming more and more greedy for power and money. At first, I thought he was just blinded by the materialistic capital. Later, I realized that he had always longed for all this, but when he arrived in the capital, his desires and greed could not be controlled and emerged. If I can survive, I will definitely tear off my father's hypocritical mask and let the world see his true face. I want Jiang Yufu to experience all the suffering that I have endured, but I was really tired. As the night went on, I had lost consciousness and was bleeding so much that I didn't have the strength to climb one more step. I lay down at the edge of the pit and saw a white ball running towards me in the dazzling snow. It looked like a horse, but also like a person. I didn't have the energy to identify it anymore. I finally looked up at the snowflakes falling on my sleeves, which were the same as the paper cut Song Chu Nian cut for me that year. I remembered that I heard the servants in the palace say this morning that Song Chunian had become the youngest associate minister of the dynasty, a well-deserved celebrity. Sure enough, he is someone who can enter the cabinet and become prime minister. He should be very glad that he was not dragged down by me, right? My eyelids were getting heavier and heavier, and I couldn't hold them up any longer. Mom, I'm sorry. I became a concubine and didn't live a good life. Before I closed my eyes, the white ball seemed to run to my side. But I don't know anything anymore. I was born when the snow fell. He also died when the heavy snow fell. But maybe God took pity on me and allowed me to be reborn. Didn't you say you were going to burn incense? Come on, I'll go with you. Ru finished eating a fragrant pear and pulled me up. I put the Mandarin duck window paper cut between the books. Okay, I'll go find Song Chunyan, let's go together. He said that he would give me a big gift on my coming-of-age day, and he must be back today. I hate his infidelity, but I must find him. Only he can intimidate Qin Mu and stop him from targeting me. Although Song Chunyan was a concubine's son, he was gifted and intelligent, and the emperor valued his talent. He was able to freely enter and leave the palace and study with the princes since he was a child. At the age of 10, he helped the emperor solve several major governance problems and was recognized by the whole court as the future prime minister. Because he had the emperor's protection, even Qin Mu had to give him some face. So, I have to find him and make good use of him to help me. This time, the door of the Song mansion opened quickly. Miss Jiang went to the side hall to have some tea first, thinking that the young master would be home soon. Where did he go? There is a serious flood in Hunan. The young master was summoned to the palace for discussion last night and has not returned yet. I nodded. Then I'll come back in the afternoon. Ru and I spent half a day relaxing in the mountains, but my thoughts were always drifting far away. Song Chunyan is not at home. What will happen when he comes back and hears about the situation in the Jiang mansion? Will you continue to act in front of me with a mask of hypocrisy and false gentleness as before? Or is it the same as in the previous life, where he denounced the poor family tradition of my Jiang family and said that it would drag him down and cut off contact with me? Then I would rather he act first. When we got back to the city, the sun had just set. The time was almost the same as in my previous life. I knocked on the door of the Song mansion again. The housekeeper looked apologetic and said, "Young master, you haven't come back yet." I froze in place. The timeline of the early Song dynasty should be the same as that of the previous life. He was not at home at this point. Then who was the person who told me to break up with me? While I was in a daze, Yenner tugged at my sleeve. Song Chunyan got off the carriage and walked towards me quickly. Every step he took made me nervous and worried. Haven't seen him for 2 years. He was still the same as before, elegant in a white robe. The evening breeze blew up the corners of his clothes, reminding me of the day I fell in love with him. It was also such an evening. He, always steady, climbed up the tree to help me take down the kite. But his temperament seemed not as calm as in his previous life. Although he liked me in the past and had secretly promised to spend his life with me, he never showed his emotions when there were outsiders. He said that people who showed their emotions on their faces would not stay with the emperor for long. Therefore, Zhang Yufu never knew about what happened between him and me. It was not until the time when Song Chunyan gave me the green jade bracelet and Zhang Yufu saw it and knew that the person Song Chunyan liked was me, that she started to plot to harm me. But today, I saw panic on his face. When he came to me, he pulled me into his arms, holding my waist with one hand and stroking my hair with the other. Xuerong, it's great that you are here. Song Chunyan's deep voice bewitched my ears, and in a trance I even wanted to forgive him. But I quickly came to my senses and said with a smile, "You know about my family? Are you worried about me?" He nodded, with a hint of pity in his eyes. "I stayed in the palace last night and woke up early thinking about your birthday, but the emperor wouldn't let me go. It's my fault. If I had gone to Zhang's house earlier today, you wouldn't have to face all this alone on your birthday." The concern in his eyes is so real. I secretly admired him and was afraid that even the best opera troupe in South Street could not perform better than him. I pretended to be scared, but Qin Mu's target seems to be me, and if he can't get me, he will definitely think of another way. Song Chunyan spoke without hesitation. "I will go to Zhang's house to propose marriage tomorrow. As long as we get married, he won't dare to do anything wrong." I asked back, "Do you still want to marry me? Don't you care that I have a sister like that?" Song Chunyan said softly, "Of course not. She is she and you are you. If I were the one who was defiled today, would you still marry me?" I still ask the question. This is the pain point in my heart that I have always been reluctant to touch. Song Chu Nian suddenly grabbed my shoulders and said solemnly, "Yes, I know who you are, and I will never be swayed by rumors. In my eyes, you are the purest. As long as the knife doesn't stab you, you can talk nonsense. Aren't you afraid that I will ruin your future?" I continued to ask. Song Chu Nian suddenly laughed and said, "Don't worry. If the emperor doesn't let me be an official because of this, then I will take you to travel around and live a happy life." On the day I came of age, Song Chu Nian performed several plays, all of which were very exciting. I told a lot of lies, but it doesn't matter. I already know the real answer. I slept very badly that night. I had never had a good night's sleep in the palace before, so I couldn't close my eyes and fall asleep. I fell asleep at daybreak, and less than half an hour later, Yenner woke me up. The eldest girl had returned and was crying in the hall while hugging the lady. When I rushed to the flower hall, Jiang Yufu was sobbing with red and swollen eyes. Zhao was holding her hand and wiping her tears, and my father was sitting in the main seat with an expressionless face, lost in thought. I laughed out loud and said, "I haven't congratulated you on your marriage yet, so I prepared a gift for you today." I asked Suelua to present a wooden box. There is a cute porcelain doll inside. This is the lucky doll I got for my sister yesterday at Qingyin Temple. It can bless women to have a son soon. My sister is loved by the prince. If she can have another child in the future, even if she is a concubine, she will have a stable life. My words were meant to hit Jiang Yufu and Zhao's throats. Jiang Yufu was so angry that she almost couldn't breathe. She snatched the porcelain doll and smashed it to the ground, crying loudly, "Father, you have to make the decision for your daughter." My father's expression softened. After all, he had a part in Jiang Yufu's entry into the palace. Just as my father was about to speak, the housekeeper came to report. The Song family had sent a letter proposing marriage. I looked at Jiang Yufu with a smile. Today is really a double happiness event. My sister is coming back to her parents' home, and I am going to discuss the marriage. This sentence was extremely damaging to Jiang Yufu. How can a concubine perform the ritual of returning home? She must have reached some kind of agreement with Qin Mu and came back to harm me. What hurt her heart even more was that Song Chu Nian wanted to marry me, came to propose marriage, and sent 3 letters and 6 betrothal gifts, with a formal matchmaker. Jiang Yufu roared. Her voice was piercing, like a trapped beast. "It's just that I'm at the end of my rope, and there's no other way out. Take the eldest girl away first. Xuerong, you also go and wait behind the screen. I will go to meet the people from the Song mansion," my father ordered hurriedly. At this time, he didn't want Jiang Yufu, who had just lost her life yesterday, to ruin my good deeds. The father knew very well that he had offended Qin Mu. If I can get close to Song Chunyan now, it will be a good thing to have an extra backer in the future. Besides, Song Chunyan had a great reputation. To propose marriage after something that had damaged the family's reputation happened yesterday was undoubtedly to support the Jiang family. My father naturally loved it. I have never seen such an attentive father. He always smiled and was extremely polite to the Song family, fearing that they would be unhappy and would not agree to the marriage. I sat behind the screen and looked at Song Chunyan. His eyes were full of smiles, and it seemed that they were sincere. The marriage was scheduled for October 8th, 2 months later. My father wanted it to be arranged as soon as possible because he was afraid of any mishaps. Before leaving that day, Song Chunyan gave me a book. I have already cut this pair of window paper cuts. Now I only hope that I can cut the candle in the west window with you as soon as possible. The window paper cut in the book is a pair of twin crabapple flowers sandwiched between the page that reads, "Holding your hand and growing old together." The hatred in my heart seemed to have dissipated a little. Song Chunyan, how come you always find a way to make me fall in love with you? Before long, the whole capital knew that Song Chunyan and I were engaged, and Qin Mu never came to bother me again. When Jiang Yufu returned home that day, it turned out that he had sent her there to gather information. When she learned that I was engaged, I heard that Jiang Yufu was hung on the beam and beaten by Qin Mu that night. After hearing this, Zhao cried 5 times, fainted 3 times, and pulled her father's sleeve. begging him to bring Jiang Yufu back. My father was silent for a long time, then asked me, Song Chunyan, is there any way to get your sister out of the palace? She is not disciplined and has brought disgrace upon the family. But she is my daughter after all, and I have loved her since she was young. Seeing her situation now, I feel bad for her. Can you ask Song Chunyan for help? Jiang Yufu was just beaten, but her father was anxious to find someone to save her.
But what about me?
I was tortured like that. Zhao went to the palace to see me personally. They all knew about it, but they never thought of rescuing me. It turns out that in my father's heart, I am really not worth mentioning. Chunyan told me that Prince Mu was afraid of him and his majesty, so he didn't target the Jiang mansion. If I took my sister out and made him angry, I'm afraid Chunyan wouldn't be able to help. Even though my elder sister is not happy now, no one will be killed. Madam, if you teach my elder sister more and make the prince happy, everything will be fine. It's okay for me. After I get married, I will be a member of the Song family, but I'm worried about my father. My father was silent for a long time and then sighed. Don't mention this anymore. He chose to protect himself. My father loved my sister, but not much. No match for his love for himself. When I was about to leave, my father suddenly turned around and stared at me. These few days, I always feel that you are different from before. When did you become so shrewd and selfish? I smiled calmly. If I wasn't smart, I would probably be the one getting beaten in the palace today. My father's eyes were a little evasive. You don't listen to the servants' gossip. I ignored his embarrassment. My father knew whether it was true or not. My father left in a hurry and almost fell on his way out. I looked at his back and laughed. It was so funny. In the afternoon, I was sitting by the lake enjoying the breeze, and I saw Zhao from afar, looking ashen-faced. Her father rebuked her, saying, "A married daughter is like spilled water." It was her own affair that brought her to this fate. You should pray to the Buddha and pray to the palace to keep her alive. Don't talk about taking her out again in the future. If the news gets to the palace, who'll be able to deal with it? Zhao knew clearly that Qin Mu kept Jiang Yufu for two reasons. One was to get money from her father, and the other was that Jiang Yufu had messed up, so he kept Jiang Yufu to vent his anger. Now that her father has given up on Jiang Yufu's fate is clear at a glance. Passing by the lake, Zhao stared at me, unable to hide the hatred in her eyes. I met her gaze with a smile. I advise Madam to listen to your father. After all, the one who survives to the end is the winner, right? Zhao glared at me and left. She didn't dare to harm me. If I was hurt in any way, my father would never let her off easily. Let's go and see Dad. I went to the study room with my dad's favorite sweets. After a few words of gossip, the housekeeper came to report that Song Chunyan had arrived. My father hurried to greet him. "Shuerong, aren't you going?" I lowered my head shyly. "No." The father laughed twice. "Daddy understands my little daughter's feelings." I asked Song Chunyan to come and talk about calligraphy and painting with my father. Taking advantage of this opportunity, I successfully found what I needed in the study: evidence of my father's acceptance of bribes and collusion with officials from various departments to buy and sell official positions. Now I just need an opportunity, a chance to bring down my father's reputation. I have to finish what I need to do before my wedding. I can't really marry Song Chunyan. So when Song Chunyan asked me to go to the garden where we first met, I was very reluctant. What was he going to do? Reminisce about the past? Unfortunately, all I can recall is this sentence: "You are dirty and not worthy of me." I used the excuse that I had something to do and didn't go, but I didn't expect Song Chunyan to come to Jiang Mansion to find me in person. "Shuerong, just this once, I have something important to tell you." We sat under the big willow tree that we once loved most, and Song Chunyan handed me a booklet. "This is the strategy for the world that I wrote. 2 years later, this article will make me the true right-hand man of the emperor." I was a little confused. Why 2 years later? Why not now? Song Chunyan didn't answer me, but asked, "Shuerong, your temperament has changed a lot recently. What happened? I remember that you used to care about your sister the most. Why do you ignore her now? Is it really because she cheated on you?" I lowered my head and said vaguely, "She betrayed my trust." Song Chunyan sighed, put his arm around my shoulders and said softly, "Shuerong, do you believe me? I will help you get revenge." My heart was shocked. What does this mean? He knows my hatred? Song Chunyan continued, "I have been observing you these days, and you are still you, but you are more defensive and indifferent, and there is always hatred in your eyes that cannot be hidden. I know that you remember those things in the past. You also live a new life with memories." I turned around and looked at Song Chunyan in shock. He was also reborn? Isn't the condition for rebirth that one must die first? Song Chunyan held my hand tightly and explained, "I died a few hours later than you, so when I woke up again, I was in the palace. I was trapped by the emperor and couldn't leave. I was very worried, but fortunately you are okay." Song Chunyan's eyes were a little moist, and he seemed to be in great pain. But I was very rational. Since he also had memories of his past life, I didn't have to act anymore. "Then, Lord Song, do you want to explain why you kicked me out of the Song mansion that day?" Song Chunyan looked guilty. "It was already late at night when I returned home that day. After learning about your situation, I immediately rushed to the palace, but I didn't see you. Later I learned that my brother had sent a message to you in my name without authorization because he was afraid that you would affect the Song family. Since then, I have never spoken to him again. I wanted to rescue you from the palace, so I went to ask the emperor for help, but he said that your father agreed, and there was nothing he could do. I could only think of ways to make achievements and gain a chance to get you out. Finally, I wrote this article, Strategy for the World, and was promoted to the position of assistant university scholar. When I went to find you with a gold medal given by the emperor, you had already been sent out of the city. I watched you lower your head little by little, and my heart ached so much that I wished I could fly over to you. But when I finally got to you, you were no longer breathing." As Song Chunyan spoke, tears were already falling. Looking at his expression, my heart ached as well. I brought you to the Song family's ancestral tomb and held you in my arms as I entered the coffin. I said that no matter how many difficulties and dangers there were, or whether we had to endure life, old age, sickness, or death, I would marry you into my Song family. It was my fault for not coming back early that day and saving you. So I thought, at least I have to walk the road to the underworld with you. As I listened to Song Chunyan's story, I didn't realize that I was already in tears. He actually died for me. It turns out that the white shadow I saw in the snow was him. I suddenly understood why he was so flustered and disregarded his manners when he saw me outside the Song mansion that day, and why he hugged me in public. I see. It turns out that the young man I like has never despised me, and he always believes in me. On the way home, I held Song Chunyan's hand tightly, feeling the warmth of his palm. Song Chunyan noticed my emotions, hugged me tightly, and rested his chin on my shoulder. "Shuerong, don't be afraid. I will never let go of your hand this time." We hugged each other all the way like this. Neither of us said a word, but I felt extremely satisfied. I hugged the boy I loved, and he loved me too. But before I can enjoy this joy with peace of mind, I have to get rid of the people who are in my way first. Song Chunyan is like a worm in my stomach, always knowing what I am thinking. He freed his hand and rubbed my head. "I have thought of a way to bring Qin Mu down." This Strategy for the World was published 2 years ahead of schedule. The emperor praised it highly in the court and allowed Song Chunyan to choose an official position at will. He was elected Minister of Justice. A new official has 3 things to do when he takes office, and the first one is to burn those old cases that have been suppressed. He dug up all the cases of officials protecting each other in the past and petitioned the emperor for investigation and handling of each one. The emperor was very pleased and praised him as the reincarnation of Justice Bao. As long as our beloved Lord Song is here, why should we worry about the prosperity of our dynasty? The emperor said this himself. So when Song Chunyan finally listed Qin Mu's crimes in a whole book, the emperor could no longer defend his brother. If the emperor breaks the law, he will be punished the same as the common people, let alone this prince who does all kinds of evil on a daily basis. His Majesty can no longer turn a blind eye, as the officials under him are all watching him. Finally, The Ministry of Justice convicted Qin Mu of 12 counts punishable by beheading and 18 counts punishable by exile. When Song Chunyan told me this, his tone was very calm. Compared to the torture you suffered, he was actually relieved. When the guillotine fell, his guilt was absolved. I took his arm to comfort him. Will His Majesty go to the heavenly prison before the execution? Your Majesty, of course you won't go. But I can go. Qin Mu was sitting on a straw mat in shackles, looking at me, smiling as wantonly as ever. My little beauty, you can't bear to see me die, so you come to visit me, right? I ignored him and ordered people to pour ice water on him. He shook his wet hair and said with a smile, "That's great. It's still hot today, and I need some ice water to cool down." But after being poured with more than 10 basins of ice water, he gradually lost his composure. He screamed at me, "Do you know who I am? How dare you treat me like this?" Still no one paid any attention to him. After pouring enough water on him, I sprinkled salt all over him and tied his hands and feet. That night, he would feel cold and itchy, but he would have no choice but to endure it. After coming out of the Tianlao, Song Chunyan didn't say a word. After a long time, he suddenly hugged me and cried. "He used to treat you like this, didn't he?" I bit my lip. A drop in the bucket. Song Chunyan cried even harder. He hugged me and kept apologizing. "I'm sorry, Shuerong. It was my fault that you suffered for 2 years. It's all my fault." I wiped his tears and kept comforting him. It was my own carelessness that led to Jiang Yufu's trap. "I don't blame you. I really don't blame you." But no matter how I persuaded her, Song Chunyan just kept crying. It was the first time I realized that when a man becomes emotional, he is so difficult to deal with. Then I had to use my ultimate move. I raised my body and moved closer to Song Chunyan, then kissed his lips. I used my lips to block the gap that was constantly causing me to resent myself. Song Chunyan's ears turned red instantly, but he quickly reacted and hugged me and kept biting me. "Shuerong, you have learned bad things. However, this bad thing can be retained." Until Qin Mu was escorted to the execution ground, he still didn't believe that Song Chunyan had really brought him down. Being soaked in salt water all night last night must have been uncomfortable, and he looked visibly more haggard. No longer has the majesty and unruliness of the past. The onlookers threw eggs and rotten vegetable leaves at him. It was said that this was tacitly approved by the emperor. His Majesty hopes to use this as a warning to all his subjects. Even if it is my brother, if he makes a mistake, he will be paraded through the streets and beheaded. However, the emperor probably did not expect that there would be someone among the people who was proficient in shooting skills, and the daggers soaked in poison were thrown towards Qin Mu's knees and waist. The officers and soldiers wanted to suppress the rebellion, but they were no match for the large numbers of the people. When Qin Mu was finally sent to the execution ground, he was covered in blood. The wounds from the knife had quickly festered, and he was in so much pain that he almost lost consciousness. Qin Mu was beheaded. The servants were exiled, and the women were punished to serve in Zinaku, and they were not allowed to be transferred for life. Jiang Yufu was a singer in the palace, not even a concubine. Therefore, she was punished to become an official prostitute. I heard that men were lining up to find her, wanting to see what charm this former legitimate daughter of the Jiang family had that could make Qin Mu stay overnight at the Jiang mansion. When Jiang Yufu found out that Song Chunyan liked me, one of the reasons she was upset was that I was born out of wedlock and was lowly in her eyes. But now I don't know who is really lowly. Jiang Yufu wrote several letters home crying, but her father refused to accept them all. At this time, he didn't want to have anything to do with Jiang Yufu at all. He was even glad that he had said that day that he would break off relations with her. However, before he could celebrate for a few days, he was summoned to the palace. His buying and selling of official positions and accepting bribes privately were the second fire that started in the early years of the Song dynasty. With Qin Mu taking the lead, the emperor showed no mercy at all. My father and Zhao were exiled for life. It is said that during their exile, both of them fell ill due to poor health and eventually died on the road. Only I was not implicated because I was engaged to Song Chunyan. The third fire in the early Song dynasty burned down his own official position. He asked for leave to go home. I miss my wife at home and have no intention of going to court. I asked him why he wanted to resign. He took one last look at the city gate and placed a kiss on my forehead. The capital is full of bad memories. You are sad to see it, and I feel heartbroken to see it. We will go far away, travel the mountains and rivers, taste tea and drink wine, and become a happy couple of gods. Mo Ru cried so hard at the city gate. If I had known he was going to take you away, I would not have let you marry him. But she didn't cry for a while before being coaxed into tears by Song Chunyen's red tasseled spear. Thank you for helping me take care of Xiwerong and accompanying her through the most difficult night. We got on the carriage and waved goodbye to Mo Ru. The city gate became farther and farther away and finally disappeared in the sunset. I snuggled in Song Chunyen's arms, planning what to eat tomorrow morning. Sitting next to him were Yenner and Suelo, who were dozing off. Lift the curtain, snowflakes begin to fall. Winter is coming. It's time to add more fuel to the fire tomorrow. End of full text.